where the Washington Commanders stack up in NFL history in the win-loss column and where they can improve on their historical standings. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or view of the day every day. Don't forget you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and you can continue the conversation over on Subtext at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders, where you can go one-on-one with me because I am your host, David Harrison, DHarrison82 on Twitter, credential member of the media and Washington Commanders beat reporter for Commander Country Sports Illustrated's FanNation site covering the Washington Commanders, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, those of you who come through every day and join the program, I greatly appreciate all of you for your continued support of the show. On today's episode of Locked On Commanders, we're going to discuss milestones and records of the team and player variety that could be reached and exceeded this coming season. We're going to start off today's episode by talking about team milestones to keep an eye on here as the regular season gets going. Figured we would start doing a little bit of regular season preview stuff because once training camp hits, it's going to be hot and heavy. Practices, news, notes, analysis, even on the off days of practice or travel days for preseason games. We're going to have stuff to catch up on, quotes to talk about, interviews to share, all kinds of madness coming. And then we'll get a little bit of a break between the last preseason game and the end of training camp and the beginning of the regular season. We might revisit some of the stuff we're talking about now just to keep it fresh in everybody's mind. But I figure this period is a good period because no Washington Commanders, at least at the time of this recording, knock on wood, it doesn't happen anymore, but none of them getting arrested or investigated or anything else. So none of the bad stuff in the news that tends to come this time of year. And no ownership updates because, again, as we talked about recently, everydayers will know the first possible date for the upcoming vote is not until July. So we had a little bit of time before that. But let's talk about what's coming in the NFL season and some milestones. Obviously, we want to look forward to wins, maybe a playoff push, but there's some other things to look at along the way for the Washington Commanders. First and foremost, FedEx Field is turning 26 years old this year, and I know that FedEx Field has not aged very well in the eyes of many, many people. But turning 26 years old this year. So happy birthday to FedEx Field for what it's worth. Historically, the Washington Commanders team franchise record 625, 630, and 29. Now that does predate the Super Bowl era, right? But an 11-6 franchise win-loss record this season would bring the Washington Commanders back up to 500, 630, 630, and 29. Historically, another tie would give them 30 ties, and then depending on where that extra win or loss goes, would determine whether or not this team falls one game shy or two games shy of hitting that 630 mark. Now, in the Super Bowl era, in the regular season, the Washington franchise is 445, 428, and 9. That is the 12th best regular season record in the Super Bowl era, the 16th best win-loss percentage, again, in the Super Bowl era, and they have a total playoff record of 23-20, and their Super Bowl era playoff record is 20-16. That is the 13th best in the National Football League, and they have the 8th best win-loss percentage, again, in the Super Bowl era, and they are one win in playoff wins behind the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants. The Eagles obviously gaining multiple playoff wins this last season. The Giants gained one and broke the tie they were in with Washington. So Washington has the opportunity to make the playoffs, get a win, get two wins, and you can not only tie your two division mates, but potentially overcome them as well. 3 passing touchdowns this season for the team, doesn't matter who the quarterback is, would make Washington the 9th team to reach 1,200 passing touchdowns since the NFL Super Bowl era began. So again, 8 teams right now have reached the 1,200 passing touchdown threshold. Washington will be the 9th as soon as the 3rd passing touchdown is thrown this season. Hopefully that's week 1 against the Arizona Cardinals. Their defense, Washington's defense, is 1 pick 6 away from 95 in franchise history. Again, Super Bowl era numbers here. 2 fumble returns for touchdowns from having 65 in franchise history. Now, turning from the league to the NFC East, if they sweep the Cowboys this season, which, look, if you ask me, I think it's certainly possible. Again, we'll see how Sam Howell kind of gels with the team and the scheme as we get through the preseason. But if Sam Howell, and stop me if you've heard this, but if we get average or better quarterback play from Sam Howell, then I think this team could do some real damage. In Dallas Cowboys, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I look at what they've done with their roster and what happened this offseason. Again, Brandon Cooks doesn't scare me. Maybe you should, maybe he will by the end of the season, but right now it doesn't really scare me all that much. And I feel like while their defense is going to be improved, certainly, I don't know if the offense is going to be as good as they think it's going to be. Sweeping the Dallas Cowboys this season, if they can pull that off, would give Washington 50 wins all time, regular and postseason combined, against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, unfortunately, they would still trail the Cowboys in the series between the two teams by 26 wins. So certainly a lopsided series between the Cowboys and Washington. They've got one win, or if they get one win, rather, against the Eagles this season, that would give Washington 90 all-time wins against Philadelphia Eagles. And Philadelphia right now is the only NFC East team that Washington leads the season series against. And even if the Eagles sweep them, they're still going to lead the all-time series against the Eagles, no matter what happens. Flipping over now to the 2023 schedule of opponents, the Washington Commanders. Washington franchise has faces eight teams this season. Rather, they have winning records against all-time and 6 that they have losing records against all-time. The Eagles, in that series, Washington leads 89 wins to 82 losses. Against the Arizona Cardinals, the Washington Commanders have a 76-47 win-loss record. Bears, they're 27-24. The Falcons, they're 17-10. The Patriots, they have a 6-6 or 6-5 record right now. Rather, that will obviously fall to 6-6 if they do lose against New England Patriots. The Seahawks, the Washington franchise, is 13-9. The Rams, they're 26-14. The Jets, they are 8-4. There are some ties in there as well. They trail in the all-time series against 6 of the teams that they'll face. The Dallas Cowboys being the biggest, actually not the biggest one, but one of the biggest ones. 48-76 against the Cowboys all time. 71-106 against the Giants all time. It's going to take a lot of years to catch up in that series if they ever do. The Dolphins are 6-9. The Bills, they're 6-10. The 49ers, they're 12-22. And the Denver Broncos, currently they're 7-8, but can even that up to 8-8 with a win in Denver in week 2. And a win in Denver in week 2 could also mean something else important to another member of the Washington Commanders, especially if they get a win against Arizona Cardinals in week 1. Not only would it be a 2-0 start, but it would be a significant milestone for another member of the organization. Let's narrow down the scope a bit and take a look at some returning players and one coach who could be hitting a career milestone or career milestones in 2023. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. Week 1 NFL odds are up on FanDuel, and right now the Washington Commanders are 6-point favorites against the visiting Arizona Cardinals to get that first win of the season. You can take -110 odds if you want to take those points, or you can go money line and get -245 odds. And if you think the game is just going to be at least 1 of 7, the over-under on Washington Commanders wins right now is set to 6.5. So if you think the team's going to win at least 7 games, you can bet on that with -122 odds. And if you're really bold and you think Sam Howell is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this year, you can take the +300 odds for the Commanders to make the NFL playoffs. And if you put a $100 bet on that, you will make $300 profit, assuming that it actually happens. Don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view today and every day. Everydayers, once again, greatly appreciate all your support. Subtexters, also a special group to me. I appreciate your support as well. If you want to get in on the subtexting fun, you can do so by going to joinsubtext.com/lockedoncommanders. We have a pretty good time over there. Right now it's a little slow because there's not a whole lot of news and analysis to share, but it will pick back up again as we get closer to training camp. Continuing today's look at upcoming milestones and records for the Washington Commanders. And now we're going to focus on the returning Commanders players, but we're going to start with head coach Ron Rivera and some of his milestones that he is shooting for. If you're on YouTube with me, the image you see, these are things that Ron Rivera can achieved. And I want to keep in mind all these slides. These are things that these players and coaches can achieve this season, not things they've already achieved. So if you see ranked 8th in something, that means they're within the grasp of reaching that ranking, not currently sitting there, if that makes sense. I'll try to explain these as much as we go through. Week 10 at Seattle is going to be a significant milestone for head coach Ron Rivera, because that will be his 200th game coaching in the NFL as an NFL head coach. Currently, Ron Rivera's record as a head coach, not the greatest in the world, 98 wins, 90 losses, and 2 ties. But he could hit 100 career head coaching wins in the regular season as early as week 2 against the Denver Broncos. So remember, we go back and talk about that Broncos potential win, especially if they pull off a win against the Arizona Cardinals. Then you're looking at wins number 99 and wins number 100 in Ron Rivera's career. Could also hit 100 career losses, though, if this team loses 10 games, which I don't think they're going to. But if this team loses 10 games, he will hit both 100 wins and 100 losses in the same season. 500 or better is a record that Ron Rivera teams have hit 4 times in his 12 seasons as an NFL head coach. 3 of those came with the Carolina Panthers. The only one with the Washington Commanders, of course, was last year, 8-1. So looking for that 5th season at 500 or better, hopefully better, right? 3 double-digit win seasons in his head coaching career, all of them with the Carolina Panthers, 8 career playoff games as an NFL head coach, has a 3-5 record. And just because I like these types of stats, 77 times in his coaching career, he has challenged to play. He has won 37 of them. So that's a 481 win percentage for Ron Rivera when coaching, or rather when challenging plays here in the NFL. So that's our coaching stats and milestone update for head coach Ron Rivera. We'll be sure to congratulate him on his 200th game, week 2 against the week 10 against the Seahawks, and hopefully his 100th win, week 2 against the Denver Broncos. Now let's get into the players here, and I want to start off with a player. He's a fan favorite. He's a really cool dude to talk to, and that's punter Tress Way. And punters don't get a lot of love here, so I want to start off with Tress Way here. Currently, Tress Way is 25th in team history in games played with 145, assuming he plays all 17 games. Which, look, if he doesn't play all 17 games, but he's not injured, that would mean there's a game where the Washington Commanders don't punt at all, and outside of kickoffs and all that stuff. But Tress Way most likely, right, going to play 17 games. That would make it 162 career games, all of them with the Washington Commanders for Tress Way. That would make him number 18 overall in team history, passing running back Brian Mitchell. And that would actually, at the end of this season, put him just 11 games from being the top punter in team history for games played. Currently, that honor goes to Mike Bragg, who played 172 games total for the Washington franchise. So Tress Way would be in line to surpass him next season and become the all-time gamiest punter, I suppose is the best way to put that. So right now in his career, he's averaging 72 punts per season. If he gets 72 punts per season, or this season, he would pass Bob Parsons, who's a punter for the Chicago Bears, who not currently, but retired with 707 career punts. Tress Way would end up with 725, which would place him 60th all time in NFL history. Currently, Tress Way is 60th in punt yards in NFL history with 30,676 punting yards. He's averaging about 3,400 punting yards per season. Another 3,400 would make him 49th overall, surpassing David Lee, who punted a while back for Baltimore. So that is our punter, Tress Way. Again, a fan favorite. And I don't know if there's too many teams out there where we can start off a conversation like this with a punter and actually expect to make fans happy. But I think you guys love Tress Way. So I wanted to go ahead and give Tress a little bit of shine here on the program while I had an excuse to do so. Now, another guy that we can find an excuse to talk about almost weekly, honestly, if we really want to, is defensive tackle Jonathan Allen. And currently, Jonathan Allen is 105th in team history in games played. He's at 85. He's only 2 games away. So when he hits game 87 against the Denver Broncos there in week 2, so Ron Rivera and not Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen making some games played and coached history together there. Jonathan Allen will move into the top 100 of all-time Washington players in games played, plus 17 games. So if he plays all the games this season, would actually tie him for 70th in franchise history with 102 games played. Currently, Jonathan Allen is 10th in team history in sacks among defensive linemen with 33.5 career sacks, averaging 5.5 per year. If we add another 5.5, that gives him 39. That would make him the sole owner of 9th place in franchise history among defensive linemen, passing Coy Bacon. Now, speaking of sacks, Allen is 16th overall in sacks and will be top 15 overall if he gets at least one this season, and that is amongst the Washington players. Montez Sweat is currently 20th in team history with his 29. If he has 36 after this year, which would match his yearly average, then he will rank 15th at the end of the season. Daron Payne is 23rd with 26 sacks, and he will have 31 after this season if he hits his average, which would make him 19. So you'd have 3 top 20, 2 top 15 sack getters in franchise history at the end of the season if all 3 of these guys just hit their career average. I don't say just, but if they hit their career average. But that's enough with the defense for right this minute. We'll come back to the defense. But right now, let's talk offense with Terry McLaurin, number 17 in your program's number 1 in your hearts. He is 1 catch away from 300 career receptions. I want to see that. I want to call out to Eric Bieniemy, not call him out, but call out to Eric Bieniemy and ask him, let's get that 300th catch right away. First play of the season. Let's just do a tunnel screen. Let's do a slant. Let's do something. Let's get that ball into Terry McLaurin's hand. Currently, Terry is 8th in team history behind Pierre Garçon with 77 catches, he is 77 catches from a tie for 7th, so certainly within reach. Also, he's 8th in yards in franchise history with 4,281, and he is 268 yards from 7th place, and that is, again, Pierre Garçon. His career average, if he attains that, Terry will finish this coming season with 5,351 yards receiving, which will put him in 7th place behind Ricky Sanders. In team history, Terry is also tied for 10th in touchdown receptions, 21 of them. One of them will make him tied for 9th, and if he gets his career average, they'll give him 26, and that will put him 8th place. Again, that will put him behind Ricky Sanders. Now we're going to finish off this segment with a look at tight end Logan Thomas. And among tight ends, he is tied for 7th in receptions in team history with 129. His career average would give him 172 at the end of this coming season. That makes him 5th place among tight ends behind Fred Davis. 11th in yards currently, 114 from 10th place, which is Steven Alexander. His career average, or his average with the Commanders anyway, would put him in 8th place in the franchise history. He's currently 8th place in touchdowns for tight ends with 10 of them, 2 away from being tied for 7th. But if he gets his career average, then he will be tied for 6th place in franchise history among tight ends with 13 receiving touchdowns. So a lot of numbers that I just dropped on you there. And again, if you're on YouTube, then you got the slides and all those. You get to see those in graphic form. So that'll help you out. If you're in audio, again, feel free to pause, rewind, whatever you need to do, or jump over to YouTube, even if it's just for this to get a view of those slides. So those are some of your veteran players, right? But we're certainly not done with all of the milestones within reach. We're going to take a look at some of the younger players for the Washington Commanders. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Wrapping up this milestones and records episode of the Locked On Commanders podcast, talking about some newcomers. So we talked about the team stats. We talked about some veteran player stats. Now we're going to talk about some newcomers. I'm going to cheat just a little bit here. Sam Howell is not exactly new, right? This is his 2nd season with the team, and he does have a start under his belt. But you know what? He's new enough. I'm kind of making the rules here, so I'm going to go ahead and give myself this allowance to include Sam Howell in our new players here. And if you take the one game that he started, right, this is what kind of makes Sam Howell's projection this season a little bit difficult. We only have one game to actually look at. If you take that one game and you extrapolate that data out to 17 weeks and then you compare it to other quarterbacks in this franchise in their first seasons, then you have some interesting numbers here, right? So again, a lot has been said that Sam Howell's number is not 100% great. 11 for 19. There were some drops in those pass attempts, but he also had some running plays. But even just the passing, right? 11 for 19. Don't take away the drops and all that stuff. He would expand out to 187 completions for a full season. That would make him 2nd most among first-year starting quarterbacks behind RG3. And these are rookie quarterbacks in their rookie season. So a little bit of a grain of salt here, a little bit of an asterisk on this thing, but kind of just giving you an idea. If Sam Howell did what he did against the Dallas Cowboys week in and week out, and leaving that 11 for 19, less than 200 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, here's where he would kind of stand in the annals of first-year rookie quarterbacks if he was still a rookie. again, taking some liberties here. Again, second place in completions behind RG3, 17 touchdowns would make him third place behind Mark Rippon and RG3. 17 interceptions isn't great, but it would tie him for the second most behind only Norm Snead, who had more interceptions in his 1961 campaign, and he would throw for 2,873 yards, which again would make him second place behind RG3. So again, not a one-for-one comparison, right? Because Sam Howell's not a rookie. I compared him to rookie quarterbacks because I can't, honestly, on Pro Football Reference, I can't sort it by second-year quarterbacks in their first year starting. It doesn't let me get that detailed. So doing the best that I can there. But, I mean, you look at it, his pace in that Dallas Cowboys game, even though a lot of people came out of it and said, yeah, like they got the win, he showed some toughness, some leadership. His stats, quote-unquote, weren't really all that great. They're actually fairly good when you compare him to some of the rookies that have come through this franchise in the past. And remember, Mark Rippon, obviously, he's one of the greats of this franchise, but RG3 was well on his way before injuries derailed him. And there's some other stuff about RG3 we're not going to get into, but we're also going to look at Brian Robinson. I'm going to give myself kind of the same leeway, looking at, maybe hopefully playing a full season for the first time. Certainly not his fault that he didn't play a full season last year, but maybe this year we get a first full season of play out of B-Rob. Last year, even with the missed games, he was 5th in yards among rookie running backs in team history and 20th in touchdowns. That's obviously where we would love to see Brian Robinson get a little bit, I don't want to say better, but just a little bit more production. He'll still be 5th in yards among Washington running backs after 2 NFL seasons if he gets at least 564 rushing yards, which you feel like, as long as he stays healthy, that's a very attainable goal. Top 20. He'll stay top 20 in rushing touchdowns among Washington running backs after 2 NFL seasons. If he gets another 2 rushing touchdowns, but he needs 9 to get into the top 5 in Commanders history among running backs in their second season in order to get into the top 5. So hopefully that's, a mark that he's kind of shooting for. So again, gave myself a little bit of leeway with Sam Howell and Brian Robinson Jr., but let's talk about some actual brand new newcomers. All right, let's talk about rookie defensive backs, Emmanuel Forbes and Quan Martin. We expect both of these guys to be contributors, to be players on the field. And if they want to set rookie defensive back records for this franchise, they need to target these numbers. 13 interceptions, and these numbers set the record. So take one away, and that's to tie the record, right? But these numbers would set the record in franchise history. 13 interceptions, 2 pick sixes. Emmanuel Forbes, looking at you, buddy. 17 passes defensed, 3 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, and 6 quarterback hits. If they want to set NFL marks, then they need to target 15 interceptions, 4 pick sixes. That would be, you're talking defensive rookie of the year right there if you can do that. 27 passes defensed, 5 sacks, 11 tackles for losses, 14 quarterback hits. And I will tell you, we have seen Quan Martin and Emmanuel Forbes come on defensive back, cornerback blitzes, whatever you want to call them, so far in OTAs and minicamp. So it's certainly going to be something that the Washington Commanders dial up from time to time. And Emmanuel Forbes, in press coverage and short zone coverage, has shown a lot of intelligence in how to get to the ball carrier. We're just going to see if that can translate to the NFL level of physicality. So that is our milestone marker episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. A lot of numbers. So again, if you're listening on audio and the numbers are kind of making your head spin, head over to YouTube. There's some graphics there. You can kind of see it as we go through it. It'll make it hopefully seem a little bit more clear. Coming up tomorrow, we will be back. We've got 2 more episodes, or 1 more episode rather, dropping this week. In the meantime, if you have questions or comments, just throw them in the YouTube comments, hit me on Twitter, email them to me at lockedoncommanders@gmail.com, or send them directly to me via Subtext. As always, I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view today and every day. Again, everydayers, I appreciate you greatly. Thank you for coming through on a consistent basis like you do. And remember, you can continue this conversation with me over on Subtext at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. One last time, thank you for making me a part of your day, a part of your routine. And if you have anything else Washington Commanders related you want to discuss or you need to know, hit me up on Twitter at dharrison82. The NBA draft is happening Thursday night. So if you're interested in that, also head over to Inside the Wizards. Not just me, but plenty of talented people doing some good work over there, trying to cover your Washington Wizards through the Bradley Beal trades, the Kristaps Porzingis trades, the draft picks. It's a page-turning year for Washington sports, it seems like. So trying to keep you up to date as much as we can. Until we speak again, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.